guys, Mr. Sonnenberg here. Today we're going to be talking about inherited characteristics. This is for Science 24 students. This is Unit 3, Topic 3 of this particular unit. So let's jump right in. First we're going to talk about genetics. So basically, question for you, have you ever been told you look like your mom or your dad? I look like my mom. Luckily, as my dad has a big old afro and a big giant bison head, so it's a good thing I do look like my mom, as she has a normal sized head and normal sized hair, so it makes life easy. But the reason that we have these traits and that we do look like our parents, or maybe we look like a sibling and such, is because of genetics. So basically, genetics is just the study of how traits are passed on from parents to offspring, and we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper and talk about what this means. So where do these genetics, these traits come from? Well, we have to look at DNA, okay? So the structure of the DNA molecule, what does it look like? Well, really, you've seen DNA, oh no, hopefully you've seen DNA, but it kind of looks like a twisted ladder. I'm going to draw a completely awful one that looks like this, okay? But then it's going to move through, okay, this ladder. And in between what we're going to have a series of rungs that are going to move through the spiral staircase, the double helix, the twisted ladder, and it's going to move through. But actually what's going to happen there is each one is going to have different arrangements and different nitrogen bases, and they're going to arrange differently so that and connect differently to give us various genes. But we'll dive into that a little bit later, but it looks like a twisted ladder. So what we have here is we have chemical compounds. Now the chemical compounds that we have are actually going to make up these rungs in the middle, okay? Now those are going to be called, I'm just trying to get my pen here, which one? There we go. They're called adenine, and it's always paired with thymine, okay? A and T, so we'll call those A and T, adenine and thymine, just to make it easier. And then we have cytosine and guanine, okay? And those are right here, and those are other nitrogen bases. Those are going to be chemical compounds that are going to make up the rungs. So like a ladder, what we actually step up on with our feet, those are the rungs, okay? And then we'll call these ones C and G for cytosine and guanine. Now these two here, okay, are always going to pair, and these two. Now it might be T and A, or A and T. They'll have different arrangements, or C and G, or G first then C. But as long as they pair up, you will never have A pairing up with C or G pairing up with T. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Different genes are made up of different arrangements of these pairs. So just like I said, so we're going to have a variety of different arrangements. So A and T are going to be together. But maybe what we would have is in our arrangement something that maybe looked like this. So we would have C, G. Then maybe we'd have A, T, T, A, G, C, and so on and so forth on each side over here. Okay, and we're going to have different arrangements of pairs, and that is actually going to determine the traits that we inherit from our parents. Okay, so the DNA of all people on Earth is 99.9% identical, but it's that 0.1% difference that makes each one of us unique. Now, what we're going to get is we're going to get a mix of our mother and our father, and we'll talk about where that comes from as well. Okay, so chromosomes, what are these things? Okay, so in our body we have 46 chromosomes. Okay, 46, that's important to know. 46, and they're arranged in 23 pairs. Okay, and they hold genetic material. So 22 of those chromosomal pairings, okay, are going to be autosomes. Okay, and those are the ones that are going to determine your traits. But there is one set, and it's at the very bottom at the last pairing, your 23rd pairing, that is going to have an X and a Y chromosome, and those are our sex chromosomes. So if I was to just draw, just kind of hypothetically, I guess, let's just say this is pairing 1. We have chromosomes pairing up right here that look the same. Then we have 2, and then these ones pair up. Okay, these are my little chromosomes, these little X's. But then down at the bottom, okay, at 23, and just assume we skipped a whole bunch, then I might have an X, but maybe I'll have a Y as well. Okay, so our male and our female. Okay, and we'll talk about that. So the sex chromosome, the one, the X chromosome will always be given by the mother. Okay, so the mother, in this case, we could actually determine that the mother would be this one right here, and then this one would be the father over here because it has the Y chromosome. But the father has an XY, or the male, so females always have an XX, but males have an XY. So this is going to allow us possibly to determine the sex, whether it's we have a 50-50 chance. We can be a male if we have an XY pairing, or we can be a female if we have an X and an X. And the female will always provide this X on the last chromosomal pairing. Okay? Moving on. Okay, so a body contains trillions of cells, and then within each cell is a nucleus. Okay? And in that nucleus, there's chromosomes inside. And basically, chromosomes are just tightly packed with DNA. Okay, so the chromosome, it's going to basically it has an identical copy attached because in this case because the cell is dividing, so it has an attachment, and you can see that it's attached there. But the DNA is within those chromosomes, and then we can find that in the nucleus of a cell. And like I said, there's trillions of cells. But then what happens is the DNA on those chromosomes actually divides into segments, and we could see some staining on a chromosome, but maybe we would have things like this across it, some staining. Well, those are going to be our genes, okay? And that's going to determine inherited traits. So the traits you get from your parents are going to be determined by those genes on those chromosomes. Now that is an arrangement of DNA because the chromosomes are composed of DNA. So I guess we can see over here another example of the DNA arrangement. All these are nitrogen bases, okay? We can see that our cytosine and guanine are paired up, as we said, right here. But down here we can also see that adenine and thymine are paired up. And the arrangements are different through this double helix, this spiral staircase, or this twisted ladder, whatever we want to call it. And so now what happens is these are the arrangements of our genes in this DNA. And those are going to show up on our chromosomes, and that is our inherited traits. So if we take a look here, this is a chromosome map. And now what happens is a lot of these chromosomes are pairing up together, and you can see they've paired up, and they're paired up based on size. But looking through, we have 23 sets of these chromosomes. Now if you look down here, so we end at 22 right there. Well, this is the pairing, the 23rd pairing right here. Now we can tell that in this pairing, well, there's a smaller Y chromosome and an X chromosome. So can we determine the sex of this child or this individual based on the presence of a Y and an X chromosome? So remember, anytime a Y chromosome is present, the sex of the zygote or the individual is going to be male. Okay. Now that's on the 23rd pairing, so that's where we determine the sex of an individual is down in that sex chromosome. The rest of these are autosomes. Okay. So, and these are the ones down here, all these ones that determine your traits and your inherited traits from your parents. Okay. DNA replication. Okay, when DNA replicates, basically it's just making a copy of itself. Okay, and it opens up like the zipper of your coat, basically. Okay, so it just, we make a copy of ourselves. It's like we are doing what I said, unzipping our coat. So it's like we're going zoop, 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 okay, and we're replicating, and then it continues as if we were going to put it back together. Okay, it's going to zip back up and make a nice straight line. I can't draw that, I don't know how to show it, but anyways, so basically with these free-floating nucleotides, so that's what some have adenine with thymine and cytosine with guanine, and those are inside your nucleus. Well, those are actually going to match up together and with the original strand they had, and they're going to make a new strand of DNA. So we have DNA replication. This is how we make this DNA, and this is how we produce it, and this is how it continues to replicate. Okay. So inherited characteristics. Oh, just get rid of that. Okay. So these are the heredity. This is the passing on from parents to offspring. Okay. So this is where you get those traits. It can be passed characteristics or passed through your genes. Now remember, your genes are on your chromosomes. Okay. And they're an arrangement of DNA within your chromosomes, and DNA is within those chromosomes, and it's found in the nucleus of the cell, which is important to know as well. So our genes can be dominant or recessive, though. So dominant, you can assume that something was dominant. If I say, oh, I was dominating this guy in a game of one-on-one, it means I probably was beating him and handily, right? So it was dominant. I was the one that prevailed. And the recessive are going to be your smaller genes, the ones that are rarely will come out, but sometimes they do. So dominant genes will show their characteristics over recessive genes. So remember, dominant will show over recessive, and that's going to be important when we talk about the difference between homozygous pairings and heterozygous pairings. But chromosomes come in pairs, which means that the traits for our genes do too. So if we have a pair of chromosomes, then we have a pair of traits. So for scientists to understand our genes, they use 2 letters, okay? And those letters in arrangement are actually what we call our genotype, and that's right here, okay? So that the entire set of genes is an organism. So, but we take all these 2 letters, okay? Take these 2 letters in our genotype, and that might be things like this. For genotype, that would be dominant, that would be recessive. We put these together and we get a genotype. And individually, these are called alleles. Oops. Okay. And these alleles, okay, but this together is a genotype. So the capital letter, and this is, you want to know this one right here. Capital letter is the dominant gene. For example, the letter T in a capital T could represent the dominant gene for tallness, something I don't possess. Wish I did, but I don't. And I can blame my parents for that possibly, right? Because my parents are 5'8" and 5'2". Oh, and my mom would say 5'2.5". So I have to give her that extra ½ inch, I guess. But then we have the lowercase letter, which represents the recessive gene. And that's the one, remember, dominant will prevail over recessive. For example, a smaller t could represent tallness, or instead of tallness, in the gene of tallness, it would represent a short individual. So I don't know, maybe I'm kind of medium sized. I'm 5'9", so. Am I 5'9"? No, I'm 5'10". 5'10". I grew. That's right. And then organisms can be either homozygous or heterozygous. So if we take a look here, we can have homozygous pairings, which is going to give us something like this right here, 2 T's together, or a homozygous pairing will always give us this. But you can imagine homozygous dominant, like this right here, well, that's going to be 2 dominant traits, and remember, they're represented by a capital letter. And then homozygous recessive down here is going to, well, recessive traits were the lower t, so we're going to have homozygous meaning the same, 2 of the same lowercase traits, and we're going to get a homozygous recessive person. And then heterozygous, hetero meaning different, is going to get us 1 capital T and then 1 small t. And so we're going to have a capital letter and a lowercase letter together. And that means that it's a carrier of the recessive trait. But in heterozygous pairings, the dominant trait will always prevail. Okay? It will always show. So genotypes, okay, which, if we remember, genotypes were these things, this pairing of letters like this, or GG, which is homozygous dominant, or homozygous recessive, and this one's heterozygous. But those are genotypes, but they actually determine our phenotype, and the phenotype is basically just how we look physically. So therefore our gene or genotypes determine how we look, our phenotype. So based on our genes and the arrangements and the dominant and recessive alleles and the genes that are passed on in characteristics to us, determine how we look. And then so you can get us saying, okay, well, you look like your parents, or you look like your mom, or you look like your dad, or you have the same nose as your dad but the same eyes as your mom, things like that. So an example, so we'll just look at this example. So let's say your dad has brown hair, which is going to be the dominant trait, okay? And we're going to call dominant, it's a dominant trait, but it will represent your dad as a two large uppercase B's. Okay, and then you are, okay, and then your mom is going to be, so that's homozygous dominant. And we know what that means, that there's two uppercase B's. Then that means that your dad's sperm, every single one of your dad's sperm is carrying the large B, that dominant trait. Now, let's say your mom has blonde hair, which is recessive. Well, we're going to say it's homozygous recessive, so we're going to have two lowercase b's. Now, each one of your mom's eggs, now when we refer to the sperm and the egg, we're talking about gametes, so male and female gametes, and those are going to pass on these traits through the process of fertilization. So each one of these carries, so your mom's going to carry, all of her eggs are going to carry the recessive small lowercase b. And then when your dad's sperm and your mom's egg fuse together, it's going to get carried, or they each carried a gene to determine hair color. So along with all the other characteristics that make you, though. And then so basically your dad's dominant gene is going to trump your mother's recessive gene. But they're going to pair together, your dad's gene and your mom's gene. And so what we're going to get is a pairing that looks like this. And it's going to be heterozygous. Okay? And that heterozygous pairing is going to mean that you're going to have the same hair color as your dad. And it's going to be brown. So, and why? Well, it's answered up because the dominant trait always prevails. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Okay. So, inherited characteristics though. So we inherit things, so we have heritable traits and non-heritable traits, or inherited or non-inherited traits. But things that are inherited is like your hairline. So do you have a widow's peak? Do you have a flat hairline? Unfortunately, my hair is falling out, so now I have a receding hairline. Sad times in my life, I tell you. Color blindness, curly or straight hair, those are things that are inherited. You either have them or you don't, kind of discrete variations almost. Freckles, earlobe attachments, are they unattached? Can you roll your tongue? I can. What colors are your eyes, your skin color, hitchhiker's thumb, all that. And I kind of have a weird thing, because I can do this. One thumb goes straight out, one I can't bend. So I don't know if I broke it maybe or something like that, but kind of half and half there. So, but then those non-inherited characteristics, these are the characteristics that you learn through your life experience. So if I say, well, he's clear, he plays an instrument, he's a really good artist, well, his child has to be, and he inherited that trait. No, he acquired that through his life experiences, right? And we could say weight and stuff like that would be different as well, because it's based on lifestyle, right, and life experiences. Now, Punnett Square. How can we go back to that father, mother, hair color, brown, blonde, recessive traits? Well, we can say that in that case, okay, we can say, and we use this thing called the Punnett Square. And basically that just predicts it's a probability of inheriting certain traits within your genotype, okay? So if I had the dad, okay, and we're going to put the father on the top, okay, and I'm going to make a square, and this is a Punnett square. And I love Punnett squares. I like them. They're easy, so they're fun. But let's say we took the dad. Well, remember what his trait was? He was homozygous dominant. That means we're going to use two uppercase B's. Okay, we'll use B. And then the mother was homozygous recessive, meaning the same lowercase. Okay, so we put one up here, one over here, one there, one there. This is representing the female. This is representing the male. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the dominant, put it first. Okay, so we go here, but now I have to add this one over here. So I put it, now I have a genotype. My alleles now are paired up in a genotype. Remember, our genotype is going to determine our phenotype, which is how we look physically. And then I have to do the same thing here. Then I have to do the same thing here. And I take that and that over here. Okay, see what I'm doing? And now what I have is I have 100% BB, which means that it's heterozygous. So if there's a dominant allele within this genotype, what does that mean? Well, it means I'm going to have, the chance is 100% brown hair. Now you can actually see up here, if you take a look, there are some different. So we have homozygous dominant with homozygous dominant. Then we have two heterozygous pairings, and this is the first one you actually see where you have that recessive trait. So whatever the recessive trait in this series was, then that's the genotype is going to determine the risk, or there's a 25% chance that they can have it. Here, there's a 100% chance that it's going to be the dominant trait will prevail. And then here, it's 100% that the recessive trait will prevail. Okay. So that's how we determine our traits. Punnett squares are fun. They're a good way for scientists just to determine probability. So if we take a look over here, if we're determining the chance that you're going to be a male or a female, well, we can tell right over here that this is, right here is the female because it's an X and an X pairing. XX is female. We can tell this is the male over here because it's an XY. Now if we actually pair those up, then this would be a female, right? We pair those two up, then we get another female. We pair those two up, we get a male. And then pair those two up here, over here, and we get another male. So what's the percentage? Well, it's 50%. So you have a 50-50 chance of being a boy or a girl, and that's it. So, but who determines our sex? So which, is it the male or female that determines sex? I want you to think about that for a second. Well, women always produce XX, so they always produce an X chromosome. Men, X and Y, so you have a chance of either getting the X or the Y. So males are going to determine sex. Okay? Cool? Awesome. All right, last little bit of our screencast here. Oops, sorry guys. Okay, pedigrees. So this is a tool called a pedigree. It's almost like a family tree, but basically what we can do is we can trace traits through basically within a family, trace them from generation to generation. Okay, so it just shows the history of the traits along the way. So we start up at the top with our parents, okay, and this is in the first generation here, okay, and so sometimes we can see if people are affected and we can pass traits on as such, okay, but to be infected, we have to have the dominant allele in this case, okay? So it's passed on and we go to the second generation and then we can tell that this is a couple that is married. Look at the symbols. Male is going to be the square, female is going to be the circle, okay? So we can tell that that's a boy, girl, oops, wait, sorry, boy, girl, girl, girl. That's a female, so married in, they had children. Their children came out boy, girl, girl, but we can see that this male carrier was affected by the autosomal dominant disorder, and then therefore two of the children were affected by it as well. We go on this side with two unaffected parents that produced three unaffected kids over here, one male and two females. So we can determine by the shape the sex. We can also determine by the genotype. We can tell how many children there were, and then we can show how the affected trait, which is colored in, is passed on. And I'm going to show you some of these, just talk a little bit about the symbols, because you're going to actually have to create a pedigree and as one of our projects. So you're going to want to understand this. But basically as we pass on, we determine who's passed on the traits, and we can talk a little bit more about that as well in person. But if we take a look at this here, we have sex, which is male or female, so square or circle. Then if you're mating, coming together, you have a single line co-joining them, okay? Now, parents and children. So what we're going to have is a branch down, like right here. And so those parents produce two children, child one, child two, and one was a boy, one was a girl. But that's how we show that. Now, dizygotic twins are fraternal twins, okay? So it means they're not identical, they have different traits, okay, within the womb. Now here we have monozygotes. So these are going to be, sorry, that's fraternal. Oh, I don't know if you can even read that. These are identical. All right, those are identical. So monozygous twins, mono being the same, they're identical. Okay, and so the only difference you'll notice here is there is a little line right there. Okay, now sex unspecified is going to be a diamond. Then we have the number of children of sex that's indicated. Well, we would just say there's this boy or girl, and we'd put a number in. Now, affected individuals with something, they're going to be colored and shaded in. Now, heterozygous for autosomal recessive, which means that 2 recessive traits are going to show up, but the parents are both heterozygous, meaning different. Okay, so it's going to be shown such as this. Carrier of a sex-linked recessive, those are traits that occur with the sex chromosomes. Okay, if there was a death along the way that occurred, then we're going to show it with a square with a line through it. And then abortion of a stillbirth, okay, that's going to be shown right here with the line going down with the ball on it. And then proband with an arrow pointing up to the base. Now, basically, we can just look down on consanguineous marriage. Well, that means same. That means they're related, basically. So, oops, sorry. So they're related. That's what that means. So it could be, and sometimes they might even say, okay, above it, they might say, you know, second cousin or something like that. Okay. So that's pedigree symbols, and you're going to have to understand these symbols. So you might want to come back to the screencast so that you can better understand them and go through what each of these means, because you're going to be creating a simple pedigree, not a complex. And you're going to fill in one that we've created, but then we might ask you also to create a family pedigree for one trait within your family. So say eye color or something like that. Okay, anyways guys, that's inherited characteristics. Hopefully this has helped. Remember, you can play, pause, rewind these things, so you don't have to watch the whole thing at once. You can take your time and go through the post-assessment questions as well, and make sure you answer those formative questions. But hopefully this has helped. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay, bye.